All right, so let's talk about this. We have our practice, and our practice includes points of attention. And so we have clouds, which is awesome. And unless it's just a fully sunny day, there are no clouds, then you'll have to adapt to that. We have shadows, which I think is amazing too, because those are everywhere. So if it is cloudy, well, no, then you have the clouds. You know those gray skies where clouds are kind of undifferentiated? Yeah, then you might be able to use the shadows. That's what I did. I noticed that when it was like really rainy or something like that, then there's even more shadows, like shadows everywhere. All right, so what was the third one, G, if you don't mind?
Geometric shapes.
Geometric shapes, excellent. So I think in terms of feedback, Donna, are you there yet? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but
What did you ask me?
so Jean has 3 points of attention in place for today, which I think is awesome because it's only 6 a.m. and he already has a plan, already has some things that he's going to do. Shadows, geometric shapes, and clouds. Okay. What would you say about that? Like, what would you add to that, or add anything, take away anything? Like,
I would do something that was internal, something that is not external, because at least for me, my biggest challenge, and I know my brother, is thinking. It's everyone's challenge, but it's being in the mind and dependent on external circumstances to determine how I feel. So an internal point of attention is a grounding, for lack of a better word. It's a more balanced approach because I have something internal that I carry with me, even if I can't identify geometric shapes or shadows or whatever it is. I'm relying, those 3 things rely on my sight. And so maybe to engage another sense and also make one of those things an internal point of attention is more balanced, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's spot on. So first of all, I'll just say, those are 3 great points of attention, right? I mean, geometric shapes are going to be everywhere. I love clouds because if you walk outside or go past a window, then you're connecting to the day, which I think is really important too, you know? So many different things about those 3 points of attention. That is actually really awesome. So I don't want to take away from that at all. You know, those are excellent points.
Simply being aware that you're aware is the whole game, right? So having 3 points of attention is great. It's just fine-tuning it a little bit to make it more accessible.
Being aware that I'm aware. I'll come back to that. Yeah, so let's look at our equation here. So we have P1 times P2 Now I've added something here because I'm in this way, this is going to help you with the rule of 3. It's going to help you with, I love Jean's points of attention. So I've definitely made that clear. However, I think that if we don't have the full equation in place, then we may not be preparing for battlegrounds. We may not be preparing for the rule of 3. And we may not be preparing to, I don't want to say dissolve, but more so just redirect the internal thought stream when it does occur. So what I would recommend, it sounds like the P2 for Jean is solid. That's the most, you know, the most structured aspect of that equation for Jean right now is that external. P2 is the external point of attention. P1 is the internal point of attention. But I'm adding the voice of power. And voice of power is, when we talk about it in different ways, it could be a mantra, that's a voice of power. It could be substitute dialogue, listening to somebody else. I mean, you could listen to, you know, a quick recording, you could listen to a 5-minute video, you could, you know, anything like that would all be what I would say is the voice of power. And of course, eventually, and then when you read the book, the more we open ourselves up to this, the more the voice of power starts to take on a different type of complexion. Meaning that the words that we start telling ourselves are productive, they're intelligent, they're redirecting really without even trying. You know, the voice will just occur that, hey, this isn't what you want to do. You know, and so you don't really have to have that in advance. It's just the voice of power starts to remind you of what you know so that you can act on it in the moment. Good morning, Ada. Just saw that Edith has joined as well.
Hey, Ernest, could I see the whiteboard again?
Yeah.
I mean, I knew of what I do, but I answered your question from a feeling standpoint, and I forgot that that formula even existed. And it was one of the basic things. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. And then we do change it up a little bit for warrior training, just because when we get into that warrior training mode, we're adding some elements to this equation. Smooth breath, and then eyes on whatever we're doing to get that just do energy. And some people will say that's motivation, you know. I do have a lot to say about motivation. I'm working with some of those things myself too, though. So, but I still have a lot to say about it. Okay, so let's just look at this. So we're going to have a daily practice, and I think this is a super important topic. And then I do want to talk about what I didn't write it down, Donna. You said something. Awareness of the awareness, I think is what you were saying, right? Okay, I'll get into that because I think that's super important. It might be a little bit, you know, we might be jumping in the practice a little bit when we talk about awareness of awareness, but not really. We can experience it in bits, you know, right away. So the moment that we start talking about these things, maybe even a guided meditation could help somebody just immediately connect to the awareness of awareness, which isn't really a thing, and that's not the way I talk about it, but I'll clarify.
It's an expression that Joe Dispenza uses, and it's just the idea that you're choosing to focus on where you're pointing your flashlight of attention, and that's absent in most people all the time, and in many of us much of time or some of the time. So just being aware that you are, where's my mind and did I put it there, kind of thing. Being aware that you are choosing your awareness or not. Yeah.
Sometimes when folks like Eckhart Tolle would talk about awareness of awareness, I get it, you know, and I like it. And they're talking, Eckhart Tolle will call it the watcher, where awareness is simply observing, and that's a state of mindfulness, right? So P2 is an external. The VP that I'm putting, maybe it should be 2 capital, not lowercase, but it is mantra, voice of power. Now, I would need reminders personally. So this is what I'm going to be doing today, but I'm probably going to forget. So I'm going to add a note card or, you know, some paper, reminders around the house. Maybe I'll set some things up because if I'm focusing on geometry, I might identify one thing in each room that I want to check into the moment I go in there. And that would just, you know, these are just tactics. These are just, you know, ways that we can approach this. And I would have an object of power. The note card is a sort of object of power, but I would have something, for me personally, I might have something that's a little bit weighted. You know, I don't like things on my skin, not normally. So typically I wouldn't have, you know, a ring, a watch, a necklace, because I'm so aware of my body, those things start to kind of annoy me after a little while. But what I've actually learned to do, rather than get annoyed, is use it, you know, the feeling of it, sometimes even the discomfort of it, to remind me of my practice. And then all of a sudden, the tool became an object of power. It would remind me to be present, and then all of a sudden I could just look at it and I was instantly there. You know, I was instantly right back where I wanted to be in terms of focused attention. Hi Karen, hi Vicki. Thanks for hanging out. Good morning, Lisa. So when we first started, Jean I asked Gene about his practice, like what's going on today. And Gene mentioned that he had a few points of attention. And from what I know about Gene, I know he doesn't mind kind of being the focus right now. If you're the first group study, that's sometimes going to happen because we'll start chatting first and then it will kind of, move on from there. So Gene mentioned that he had shadows today, which I think is amazing. I think shadows are a teacher, and well, all of us can be a teacher, but we have shadows. Oh, geometry as a teacher, come on, like you can learn so much from geometry. So we have geometry and we have clouds as another one. You can learn from all of those. So that's amazing. Those are three excellent external points of attention. One thing that Donna pointed out also, and there's nothing wrong with it, we're just kind of looking at it from a different, just a different perspective, just to gain more understanding of what we're doing. Donna made a very good point though. So in terms of external points, all of them are vision. And that's okay. We're just going to work with what we work with. We could still, as we move along in our practice, start to add other things that are some of our other sensory perceptions. Body and space and time is a fun one. Kind of just feeling yourself move through the room type of thing. Proprioception. Sound is a huge one for me. Right now, I can hear the birds right outside the window, and that's really important for me. I always want to connect to the sounds of the world. My nose doesn't work very good, so I do look for, I like the word that Donna used, touchstones. I look for these little points of odor attention, if you will. When I come outside and it's spring, I always take a big inhale because I want to, what does the day smell like outside, And I do need to put a little bit more focus into that because that sense isn't as sharp for me. That's when I really got to practice. Taste, it just depends on what you're doing throughout the day. Typically, that's not a huge point of attention that we take with us. I don't recommend gum, so that's not going to be something that I ever recommend because it's just not great for your teeth. Don't really recommend mints and candies, but we have Lisa and some other, Donna's familiar with gardening, maybe a mint leaf, something like that. Ida, you're familiar with gardening and things. So I don't recommend gum. I don't really recommend mints because those aren't always good for you, good for your body. But maybe you want to carry a piece of mint in your mouth as a point of attention. Try it. I think that would work. Yes, Gene.
Yeah, I feel today's the first day I'm doing physical activity since the wrist. So I'll be trying to play golf. And so I was going to use that as a point of attention, but that's the focus of the day. I didn't think I needed to choose that. I'm going to feel the club in my hands. I'm going to feel the ball every time I pick it up. I have to feel my body in space because that's the whole objective of being balanced when you play the game. So I felt I had plenty of physical, internal body points of attention that I'd be using for 5 hours today. So I thought that would be a grounding thing, and I added the external points of attention, so I would get my attention off of all of those internal feelings about hitting the ball and that. So I tried to pick some external things that when I was approaching the ball or was getting the club or taking the ball out of the hole, I could see the clouds, I could look at shapes, so I could balance it. But that was my intention.
I think that's great. Yeah, I would probably personally still just keep a note card because I know the moment that I start to get into my mind in golf, I stop paying attention to the ball. I stop paying attention to my body. I start looking up as soon as I hit the ball and I'm trying to figure out where it went, which alters my swing. So yeah, no, I think those are all amazing points. They could also be very easy to forget as you go along the game, depending on how well you do. But yeah, no, I think those are amazing points of attention. Yeah, feeling the golf ball, feeling the club in your hand, taking a moment to breathe right before you hit the ball, maybe exhaling as you hit the ball, inhale as you swing, exhale as the backswing is an inhale and an exhale on when you're going the forward swing and hitting the ball. I used to live on a golf course, so I get this. Yeah, I used to just drop my ball on the 9 and then just finish the course because that's what my apartment was. My house was just right there on the 8 and 9, so I could just choose and just go about my day.
Yeah, I was a teacher for a while, so I had a concession in the summertime on the 9th hole of a golf course. And I paid the $500 to have the concession, and then I bought food that I would sell, but theoretically. But I was so attracted to the game of golf, I closed the shop after an hour or so and played golf instead. So I never made a dime.
That's funny. I can see that. All right, great. So yeah, moving right along. And now this isn't really towards Gene's practice anymore, right? This is kind of just in general. So now we can just talk about these things in a form of generality. But this is really setting up your day. You know, we're really going to intend these things. And it's the intention in advance that helps to make sure that we're not hustling ourselves with deliberate attention. Does that make sense? That we're not coasting? It's very difficult to coast if you have determined these points in advance, because you could just look at yourself and say, oh no, I wasn't looking at shadows. I wasn't looking at geometric figures. So, you know, no, I wasn't as present as I want to be. I wasn't as engaged, and my attention wasn't as deliberate as it could be. So doing all of these things in advance is wonderful. What else could we do? We could also add a little bit of a formal introduction to our day. We can add some formal practices. You know, I don't think the formal is always required. You know, you might not have the time of the day or something like that, but I think the more that you can add formal practice into what you're doing, then, you know, the more that we're setting ourselves up for success. So my first formal practice of the day is always the deepest love, highest vision, longest reach. That's a formal practice. That's a formal meditation that I do every morning. Does that make sense? So that's a formal thing. And if I forget, I forget. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, I need to start over in life because I forgot to do something today. No, I'll just usually, like Donna, to Donna's points, she's usually, you know, I'm surprised she didn't jump in, but the moment I remembered, that's a win. So the moment that I remember that I didn't do my longest, you know, my deepest love, longest reach, I just do it right then and there. And then I'm good. And then I go throughout the day. Right.
That's a
So
kind
I'm
of
working it. Yes.
sorry,
Mhm.
that's a
No,
kind
you're
of
good.
a learning curve for me, not making a leaking power situation out of forgetting to do the thing that I had said that I was going to do, like the 18 gates and all the things. For learning to be okay when I miss a couple of days is learning for me at the minute. That's what you know, does come up. I haven't done it today. It comes up in my mind, and hearing you say that it's okay, you know, not that I need you to say that it's okay. I need me to say that it's okay. But you know, that's where my practice is around balancing that and not getting into extremes of doing all kinds of things and ending up doing them at midnight because I hadn't done them earlier in the day and exhausting myself. So it was useful to hear that from you. Thank you.
For sure. I think that comes from, you know, these ideas that, you know, we need to do something to achieve a result. And so we're kind of dissolving that, because directing your attention, I mean, that's not, you're not picking up a coffee cup when you're directing your attention. You're not, you know, you're not doing an activity necessarily when you're directing your attention. We are always directing our attention, and it can be quite automatic and habitual if it's not deliberate and purposeful. So I don't really look at directing attention itself as an activity. It's not an activity per se. There's no subject, there's no object, there's no control. It's just, I have never lived a second without attention. Not 1 second of existence have I ever not had attention. Unless I'm asleep. And then I don't know. I don't know where my attention is. And if I'm in a dream, then of course my attention is in the dreaming body, of the dreaming, you know, platform, if you will. But otherwise, I've always had attention. So I am it. Right. So I get what you're saying, Ida. And I think that comes from, you know, we see teachers who say that you got to do this, you got to do this to get this. And I'm not so sure. And I think with this practice we really kind of blow that dynamic up a little bit. All right, so just looking at this again, and then I'd love to hear any questions, comments so far. But so the moment that I wake up, I go straight into my practice. If I know that there are battlegrounds, I acknowledge this. I think it's important to acknowledge this. So Ida has a clear battleground with this idea that she needs to do something to produce a particular result. I'm not so sure. Are you connected to your life experience in the present moment, and are you enjoying it? If the answer is yes, you're good. Like, what else are you trying to achieve? Are you still, and I know I'm not directing this towards Ida, but is a person still trying to level up? Are we still trying to transcend the next alpha dimension of whatever? Or are we just trying to feel peace? Are we just focusing our mind so that our life is going towards the direction of that focus? It's all just very simple, right? So the moment that I wake up, if I can remember, I'll do some formal practices. I'll do, I do exercise that's a formal practice. I love my standing meditations, because this thing that I call hydrostasy, it's a formal practice. It's a formal mindfulness practice. And it includes a standing meditation. In that standing meditation, I establish points of attention that I take with me when I move, when I sit, and when I lay down. It's all the same points of attention. So when I go down to do a sitting meditation, it is all the same points of attention as if I were walking, as if I were doing my standing meditation. And then when I'm sitting at the desk at Shenzhen, and I'm in one way, I might not be in all of those points of attention, because my attention needs to be on patients, it needs to be on a schedule. So I'll reduce the points of attention to maybe 1 or 2 or 3, or maybe just 1, my whole body, while I do everything, right? So it's a degree, and we're kind of going in and out of degrees of how much we're focusing on these points of attention. I would say at least to some degree at all times is possible. I don't think that I'll ever be maintaining 6 or 7 points of attention throughout the entire day, because as soon as Gene starts talking to me, I'm going to have to tell him, oh, well, hold up, go back. I didn't hear the first 5 minutes of what you just said, because I had too many points of attention that weren't directed at you, Does that make sense? And so these are tactics that will make our practice more successful. So Ida knows that she has these little battlegrounds. So she didn't do a practice today. And then she remembers, I personally would have a mantra around that reminds me it doesn't fucking matter. I'm going to be 110 years old and forgetting to do something. It's okay. If I remember to do it, I'll do it. If I don't remember to do it, I won't do it. My DNA will not unravel. I'm not going to miss the enlightenment boat because I was, too busy thinking about something or whatever, right? We're looking for a balance here. It's not necessarily going from one extreme to the other. And it's a skill. We accumulate it, we get better at it, we remember it more, we start taking it with us more, and then things just start to click and make sense. So we have our P1, we have our P2. I think a great opportunity is also adding that smooth breath throughout the day. And then we have deliberate breathing techniques depending on what's going on. Let's say, just for argument's sake, that Gene completely forgets his practice while he's golfing. Maybe for one reason maybe somebody says something while they're golfing, and he's just like, what? Like, what did you just, and then, his mind starts going, starts thinking, and now we're golfing and the ball's going left and going right. And, our game is just going all to shit because we're not there. Well, we can have a redirection technique that takes us back to our practice that especially can be done as a mantra. That mantra and that voice of power is one of the best ways to redirect back to where we want to be, especially in a battleground. So if I were Ida and I had that particular battleground of, maybe overemphasizing doing things and the importance of getting something done, and Ida, I get it. So that I get this, what you're saying with that. I have so many things going on, and even yesterday I'm telling myself, it's fine. I'm not trying to arrive. I've already arrived, and this is a an ongoing thing. So I don't need to over concern myself with things getting done by this time or this time or this time.
And you can only focus on one thing at a time. That's what I'm saying to myself. Focus on one thing at a time, concentrate on one thing at a time, get that done, and then the next thing will naturally come, and get that done. Focus on that and get that done. Splitting your attention drives me nuts. I come out this morning to the back garden, had cut the grass yesterday, and it's starting to look really nice, and the sun's out today. And now all these things jump out that need attention, all of them all at once. And I was just said a mantra this morning to myself, not everything needs to be done right now. Not, you know, life is constantly changing. There's change all along, and there'll be some day in the middle of July when I'm sitting in that garden thinking everything's perfect and nobody will fucking see it. So what's the point? Do you know what I mean? And wanting to have everything done to be sitting perfect. So yeah, I do battle with that, but I do use mantras and say to myself, it'll get done. And I love that idea of just when you remember to do something, just do it there and then. If I do it there and then it's done. And if I can't get it completed, at least I've started it and the momentum is going. So.
Yeah, makes sense to me. My mantra recently is, Ernest, you can do anything you want. You just can't do it all at once. That's the only catch. And there's an interesting study, and I'll have to look for it. I'm not sure where it is. I read it, and it was a good study, but it's about human cognition and our brain, and that we are not ever actually multitasking. That the human brain never actually focuses on two things at once. It just rapidly goes from one thing to another that we don't see it. We don't discern that rapidness. So if you think that you're listening to the radio while doing your work, you're not. Your brain is subtly going quickly back and forth between the two tasks, that it's actually not splitting the attention between the two tasks. I'll keep you updated on these studies because I find that fascinating. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yes, G, go ahead.
In the world of computers, that event of moving from one to the other and not doing all at the same time is defined. It's how computers work. They don't do two things at the same time. They take a slice of time and divide it up into multiple parts and devote one piece of that time to one task. Then it remembers where it left off, and it goes to the next, and it goes to the next, and all that happens in a millisecond. It does 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 different tasks. It looks like it's doing 6 jobs at the same time, but it's called multiplexing, and that's how computers can handle all of the activities it does. It chops it up into little pieces. It partitions the second into many, many little pieces, and remembers how to get back to where it was. And it's simple if you spread it out over a large amount of time, and we can understand it. But when you think about it in a millisecond, it happens multiple times. Sometimes it's hard to get a grasp on it. But that's how the computer works.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that. Multiplexing, is that what you said? That's a fun word.
Yeah, multiplexing. Yeah.
I like that word. So in 2 months, you're going to see me using that word in reference to mindfulness. We're going to be multiplexing all over the place. Does this make sense so far, though? Yeah, just different situations, different scenarios, different things that we're doing. If we have these things in place, we're going to navigate them much better. If you were coasting and then, you know, of course, all of a sudden you find yourself thinking about some of these, you know, maybe you're watching the news and now all of a sudden your mind is going down this rabbit hole, and well, no wonder you were coasting right before you turned on the TV. What the hell did you expect? You've been coasting all day. What did you expect? Like, this isn't, we've been talking about this since day one. If you're coasting into a situation, you're going to have to try to rescue yourself when you start sinking, very likely. And what does that look like? It looks like remembering, you know, not beating yourself up. But if we're intending it in advance, when we go into these situations, whether we're segmenting or multiplexing, Yes. And the coasting is, yeah, it's a doozy, but it is, it's being affected by everything around you. So when we coast, we will get pulled left and right by the world, you know. So maybe, Donna, if you were in an enlightened society, coasting wouldn't be as terrible of a thing, you know. Maybe, I don't know. That's hypothesis. I have no idea. All right, does all this make sense so far? So we're really just talking about some of the basics, you know, really refining our practice. Where is our mind? I would say that in terms of activities, I can't do multiple things at once, but I have been aware of my body while I'm talking to you. So my attention can be, and so body awareness, it's tricky because that's not, it is a form of perception because we're perceiving our body, but it's not necessarily sensory perception to a certain extent because we're using our nervous system as opposed to like a sensory organ. And it's a very fine line, you know, it's not super distinct all the time, but yeah. The more that multiple senses are coming through, that's why I told Gene, I need to narrow that down if I want to pay attention to him because I have too many things going on at once. The body, paying attention to your body doesn't really follow that dynamic as much. Imagination is another one. Imagination, you would be very hard pressed to convince a psychologist that that is a form of, it is perception because you're perceiving the imagination, you're creating that perception. But in terms of sensory perception, there's no sensory organ that is beside your brain, I guess if we count that, which I think that counts to a certain extent, you know. But the imagination isn't necessarily sensing anything outside of you. It's being created from within. The imagination of the dragon, that's not necessarily outside of me. And I say not necessarily because you'd be surprised what imagination can open you up to. And it does depend on what you're imagining, of course. And I've always been very, very clear about, you know, how to use the imagination technique. If Gene is getting on my nerves, I don't want to imagine like a bird coming down and like biting at its, you know, to get him to shut up. That's not going to be a very beneficial form of imagination. I don't recommend that type of thing. All right, so from what we've discussed so far, which is, you know, beginning your formal practice if necessary. We have our formal equation of what we're doing, internal point of attention, external point of attention, voice of power ready, Q equals flow. That's what we're looking for. Is we just want to create the space necessary for naturalness to flow. We don't need to manipulate it. We don't need to control it. All I need to do is open my body up to allow the energy body to flow, and it will do everything that it needs to do on its own. If there's a sickness that's beginning to occur, my body will heal it on its own. If that makes sense, as long as that's opened up, as long as the mind isn't interfering with this process, because the mind can interfere with a wide variety of natural body processes. All right, any questions about this? How are your practices doing in relation to this?
Just to ease up on the seriousness of holding it all day and holding 3 points and the multiplexing and all of that, which can seem overwhelming and advanced or mastery level or whatever. I've been in class a long time and I've been reading and doing this stuff a long time, and I don't know. I'm even surprised at how often I'm not doing it after all of this time. How much I rely on substitute dialogue and, you know, really basic stuff, probably because I coast a lot. But I find that over time, just the remembering and turning towards desired, turning towards remembering, not even remembering it all. Like I didn't even remember that formula. I was like, oh yeah, let me see that on the whiteboard again. It's valuable. It's very valuable. It seemed ridiculous in the beginning. Not ridiculous. I mean, I stuck with it, obviously. But yeah, just putting that on a note card is what I just did while you were talking. But just remembering and turning towards that knowing and that memory of what it feels like when it is in alignment is enough. It's really enough. I don't have to evaluate it in terms of, there I go again, coasting, there I go. I didn't spend much of the day. I was thinking about so many things, so the moving parts of my life that I didn't stay in awareness. But I remembered lots of times to turn toward it because I could feel what it feels like to be totally unconscious. And it's not a good feeling. I get anxiety, I get stomach ache, I get whatever, angry, I drop things, I knock into things, I almost fall down the stairs, really stupid things. And just the remembering and turning towards it, things kind of just align, and I feel the peace, I feel the relief immediately, and I feel like I moved more toward peace, and that gains momentum so much more quickly. Just the fact of turning toward and remembering, even if I don't hold it again for another 10 minutes and I go, well, that didn't last very long, I was coasting again. It's okay. It's like when you're riding your bicycle and you're pedaling, and that's doing the work in my mind, and then you coast, and then you feel the resistance. How long do you feel the resistance? Do you feel the resistance until the bike stops moving and you fall down like a slapstick comedy, or do you start pedaling again? You go, oh yeah. Then the sooner you remember, the less resistance you have to overcome to get back into the flow. So I find that I do coast a lot, but I do remember a lot also, and I just have to pedal a little, and things line up again, and then I'm riding again. So I just wanted to say that, because remembering that it's not the end of the world when I forget, and that I remember a lot more often than I give myself credit for, is enough. It really, there's a lot of flow in that, even if it's not mastery level, even if I didn't actually remember it every minute all day long.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate that, Donna. I'm going to save this whiteboard, but that does give me kind of a segue. It gives me an idea. Because you mentioned something earlier that I also wanted to talk about. So I'm saving these whiteboards. Zoom has a new feature with whiteboards. I'm going to explore it and see what's going on. It's like I can save the whiteboard, share the whiteboard independently and stuff like that. So we'll see. I saved that one. So let's talk about mastery level. Sure, you know what I'm going to say about all of that. But I get what Donna's saying. It can, when I talk about maintaining a point of attention all day, depending on where you're at in your practice, that can sound a little bit like, oh my gosh, he's some kind of like guru or master, or he's achieved something. And yeah, I can get why that looks that way to a certain extent, because the world has been kind of setting up that dynamic for us. So it's really easy for the mind to do things that way. So there is a reason. So hydrostasy is very simple. Hydrostasy is a very structured practice. T is a very principle-based, unstructured practice. So if you practice T, I will say the thing we need to do is to be present. We need tricks of attention. That's the principle. But in T, I'm going to tell Gene, just you tell me what tricks of attention. I don't care. Maybe if some of them are dependent on other things, then they can be a little bit more limited, and I can elucidate that for you. But with transcendental embodiment approach, I think it's really nice that it's very, you can just do what you want in terms of tricks of attention. The principle's still there, though. The 3 pillars, the methodology, it's all still there. So we're not extending beyond anything. It's still the basics. Hydrostasy is the same thing, except I'm going to give you the exact points of attention that I recommend for this particular effect. And the effect is a type of balance. It's a type of equilibrium. It's a feeling that is very difficult to describe, but that we've all felt. So someone's like, how do you describe balance, Ernest? Everybody's different, and everybody's balance is different. Sure, when you're on a surfboard, you know what unbalanced feels like. You always know what unbalanced feels like because it doesn't feel solid, it doesn't feel safe, it doesn't feel firm. It feels like at any second the world could go left or right, crashing down, and we just don't know. That's imbalance. So let's not focus on what balance feels like necessarily in the beginning. You know what imbalance feels like, right? We'll go back to the center. The moment that you feel that you're about to fall off that surfboard, let's just go back to our practice and settle ourselves in, type of thing. Now, there's a term that will be true for both tea and hydrostasy. I'll use these words for both of these types of practices, and it's called layering. The layering of your practice. One reason I wanted to use this term layering is because I absolutely reject levels. I absolutely reject mastery. I absolutely reject leveling up. And I'm not saying that this is what Donna alluded to necessarily, but it kind of inspired a topic, kind of something I wanted to share because I'm still doing all of those layers, right? So I don't want to get it twisted. I have a mantra. I have a battleground. I have things written down. I have objects of power. I'm not going into this wishy-washy, just hoping that this mastery level, just allows me to coast right through. And I know that's not exactly what Donna was talking about, but I'm just kind of expanding on the idea a little bit. So I'll give you an example. And this kind of the awareness of awareness is kind of where I wanted to go with this. And so it's a perfect segue. I have noticed something, and I'm not trying to sell this. I'm not trying to, I would love to see if other people have a similar result. You know what I mean? That's fine. I'm all about evidence-based, but I'm going to create what I call two lenses. These are lenses, all right? And what do lenses do? Typically, they're focusing, right? So light will go through a lens. It will focus the light in a particular way for a particular result. Usually with like glasses, it's so we can see. With binoculars, it's so we can see far away. With a telescope, it's so we can see even further away. So if we want to see really up close, then we have a really different kind of lens. If we want to make things look really big and we want to blow it up, then we have that different kind of lens. Does that make sense? So there's this lens. So I've noticed that the more that I practice, the lens changes. So what do I mean? I mean, attention is going through this lens. Okay, and I'll draw a little wavy line to represent attention. So attention is going to go through this lens. I'm proclaiming this, and I hope that others will confirm it. Attention is universal. Attention does not age. Attention is the constant. The attention so when we talk about the awareness of awareness, the watcher, if or when you feel that you're in that mindfulness state, no words are occurring, you're not counterbalancing, you are a little bit centered, notice that your attention has not aged. It's the exact same attention when you were 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. The lens is changing. The lens changes every single day, all day, every day. Your mind is that lens, and it is constantly in flux. Whether we like it or not, it's always evolving. It's changing over time. Hopefully, we can survive so that the brain can continue to change over time. But that was a discussion we had the other day. So does this make sense so far? Two different lenses. I haven't really described the difference between these lenses yet, but that attention is universal. The attention of a bird. And this is why we make a kinship to animals when we look in their eyes, because we can see a similarity. We can see something is very familiar about the way this animal is looking at me. Is it thinking? Probably not. Is it using language in its mind like I am? No, probably not. Is it creating concepts and all of these different things and comparing and contrasting and labeling and judging? Maybe. I don't know. Dolphins, maybe, maybe, I don't know. It's not super important. So the idea, though, is that these two lenses can be looked at in a variety of different ways. So here we have attention itself, the I am. that is universal. So I would venture to guess that if there are carbon-based entities on Alpha Centauri, they look different than we do. Their eyes, nose, mouth, ears are in completely different orders. They evolved completely differently. Maybe their legs are super short and their arms are super long, or maybe they don't have any of those. They're like flying squid creatures in the air. Who the fuck knows, right? It's so hard to imagine alien creatures because we have no context of reference. That's why in Star Trek, all the aliens have arms and legs and talk and do the same shit. It's like, okay, that's a creative costume, but really it's this ball of energy, that travels around and consumes everything. So yeah, our imagination of aliens is typically very limited to a certain extent. I would venture to guess that the attention of that being is exactly the same as mine, exactly the same as a cockroach's, exactly the same as a bird. It's the same. The attention itself is shared throughout the entire universe as a fabric of the cosmos. Does that make sense? This is a little bit of hypothesis theory, and then I'm gonna show you how I practice this. What does this have to do with Ernest's practice? And kind of showing what I wanted to point out is that I'm not doing anything different than you are. It's just my attention and my practice is turned to something maybe just a little bit different, a different feeling, a different point of focus, but I'm still doing it 100%. I'm still doing everything that you're doing, and I haven't mastered a fucking thing.
Yes, it really makes sense. And as a matter of fact, every time I feel like I have a new awareness of myself in this practice, that I've gained some expanded awareness of myself, my place, and my awareness itself, it feels both new and familiar at the same time. And I can remember a feeling as a child of already knowing that I'm working hard to, I didn't even realize I was trying to remember that. I wasn't trying to remember anything, but it was a familiar feeling and I can pinpoint it. I can pinpoint it to an age level of what, or a game that I was playing or a thing that I would do where I knew all this already. So just in my short lifespan, in the grand scheme of things, I can see that awareness remains the same. It was just my ability to align with it, notice it, be aware of the awareness. And how I use it in my practice and how it's evolving, yet there is an element that is exactly the same. And so as you describe an animal or another being or any living thing has some level of attention that is the same.
Exactly. And so I'm going to go refill my coffee, but when I come back, I want to talk about the awareness of the awareness and self-actualization. And I think it could get really groovy, but I'm also showing that this is my practice. This is what I'm doing. This is what I want to remember. This is where I'm redirecting my attention throughout the day. This is what my mantras are surrounded around. So I'll give you an example of my practice as it exists today, and you'll see all of the same components for Jean's practice today. They're pretty darn similar when you look at the bare bone principles of it. And there's no mastery involved in that bare bones principle and dynamic. So give me just 1 second, just do a quick coffee. I have a feeling there's not much left, but I'll see. Okay, so first let's look at a differentiation in terms between self-awareness and self-actualization. Now, well, I don't know how to spell actualization, so I'm just going to avoid writing it. um, I don't have spell check on the whiteboard, I don't think. So here, self-awareness, the self is defined here as our thoughts, our body, our ideas, our likes, our dislikes, our memories. Does everybody get what I mean by the word self? Before Gene was
By
born.
the word what? You froze a little bit.
Oh,
by the
sorry,
word.
the word self. When I
Okay.
say self-awareness, are we familiar with the way that I'm using the word self? Before Gene was born, there was no Gene self. Like there was, if he didn't exist, you know, that where was Gene's memory? Where was Gene's thought? Where was Gene's, it didn't exist yet. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not getting into the energy body aspect because that did exist in a manner of speaking. But the self of Gene he didn't have a name. He hasn't been, you know, conceived. He has no memories. Because he didn't exist yet. But now Gene's born. He does exist. The second he's conceived, I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, I'll have to study more, you know, biology, but I'm assuming that the second he's conceived, you know, things start to happen. You know, he's starting to accumulate. So for example, and I just learned this yesterday, so I'm sharing shit that, well, I kind of knew it, but THC crosses the placenta. You know, it will cross the barrier and it will bind to the receptor sites of the child. Does that make sense? THC will cross the barrier of the placenta and will go into the baby. And that's a part of yourself. That's a part of the story. So the story could be beginning very, very, very early on. Okay, let's advance the story a little bit. Gene is born, you know, Gene's lived life, he has opinions, he has thoughts, he has emotions, he has memories, he has hopes, he has dreams, he has things that he cares about, people that he cares about. That is the self. Is that cool? The way that I'm using the word? That's not too far-fetched, right? Who has heard this phrase? We are the entire universe experiencing ourself, itself, as a human being. Has anybody ever heard that? That's nice. I always read that and I'm like, oh, I'm the whole universe, you know? Molecules in my left hand come from a different star than my right hand, and woo, that's cool. Well, it's more than just cool. It's actually something else. I do feel it differently, you're right. So in this lens, the lens helps to create what I call perception. And remember that the lens is, it could be, it's more than just the brain, but for argument's sake, we could say it's mostly the brain, the way that we're talking about it. That's the lens. Of course, it includes the body, the energy body, those are a part of it too. It's just a little easier to talk about when we just say brain, you know. But we have perception. Both are perception. So perception. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. So we have perception, and attention itself is going through the lens to create perception. If we have two different lenses, then we have two different perceptions once it goes past this point. So once it goes through the lens, it could be different. What we're perceiving could feel different, could seem different because it's in the lens now. And that's the principle of the hawk. The lens is unique to Jean's brain. That's Jean's lens. You know, Donna has her own brain. She has her own lens. Everybody's lens is individual. The bug, it has its own lens. That being an Alpha Centauri that's floating around the air like a squid, it has its own lens. And therefore it creates its own version of perception. Does that make sense? The way that I'm talking about it? Okay. So in this practice, we do start becoming more aware of ourselves, our thoughts, our likes, our actions, our dislikes, the things that we do, you know, everything that would be defined as Ernest or Jean or Donna or anybody else, right? So to be aware of that is super duper important. We've heard ancient people say, know thyself. What are they talking about? Know the construct of your perception of who you are, or who the self that we just talked about it. All of those different aspects of what we call the self. Know it. Because if it's unconscious, you don't know it. You've never really paid attention to it. You've never really analyzed it, looked at it. You've most likely never done those things in real time or as they occur. So some people can be self-aware in a very delayed sense. Maybe a week later, they're like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have cussed at my child. Maybe I shouldn't have, in anger, sent him into his room and slammed all the doors, and maybe that wasn't a good idea. Well, I think that's still beneficial. It's still a little bit of self-awareness. We're still a little bit aware of ourselves and what we're doing, and maybe we can make some alterations that equal less violence and less trauma and things like that. So that's good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Always learning. Yes, always, always, always. And this practice, you really start to focus on all of that. Where is my mind? Where are my thoughts? Where is my body? Where is my attention, that universal attention that we're talking about? Where is it being directed? Or is it just going all over the place, right? So this all really starts to make sense. Well, there is another type of thing that can occur, and it is a feeling first. And that's why, like I was telling Shana, it gets so tricky to talk about it because you really do need, you have all the information I can give you. I can't give you any more information. Now I can share my experience a little bit with you. And that's the second part of knowledge. You gotta go feel it yourself somehow to really get that full picture of what's going on. But that there is a different type of self. It's not just the story that we're telling ourselves. It is the entire universe having achieved self-awareness of the universe, which is self-actualization. So my dog, for example, I have no reason to believe that my dog is aware that he is a part of this intergalactic, infinite matrix. Actually, I don't know about a lot of people. I don't know if there's a lot of people that know that have felt that universal type of awareness. Well, how do we feel that? Well, what is necessary to have that feeling? So in this one, I'll use this one as a beginner. I'm using these very arbitrary. So beginner has 2 G's, beginner, yeah, beginner. That doesn't look right. Does beginner have 2 G's? Words look weird. Okay. Practiced. So in the beginning, this lens, because we're still learning to pay attention to ourselves, we're still learning to pay attention to the things that we do and how we do them and how we say them, I am willing to say that this lens is not very clear. It's a little bit muddy with trying to control, trying to impress, trying to achieve. And it gets clearer and clearer the more that we go along. The more that we practice, the more we start to see our emotions, our behaviors, our thoughts, and it all starts to look like, oh, this actually does start to make sense. And so that lens can become wildly clear. And that is a mind that is connected to the moment with all 3 pillars. That's where the clarity is coming from. Presence, mindfulness, and attention that is deliberately engaging the world around it and inside of it, just engaging deliberately. Those 3 things will clear up that lens. The third thing is what maintains the first 2. We've talked about that. This is kind of an order of operations type of thing. So as long as our 3 pillars are intact, the more we maintain our 3 pillars, the more things naturally just start to become clear because we're looking at it, we're seeing it. Every now and then inner guru is describing what this feeling is, just to let us know what's going on. We already know, but the inner guru is reminding us because we forget very often. Well, after you practice a lot, this lens becomes wildly clear. And attention starts to go through a very clear lens. And a different type of feeling occurs when the self, oh, two N's, that makes more sense, beginner. Yeah, that's why it looked funky. But the more that attention is going through a clear mind, you can feel that universal self. And the more that you are in that, the more you are self-actualized. And that self is a universal self. So look at this. Let's say that the universe is just full of energy. Well, we are that energy. We already know that. You know, we see that in memes. We're seeing that even in science textbooks now, where it talks about the fundamental constituents of matter, of life, of everything, you know. So we do have some idea of these things. Well, imagine that the universe, which is infinite, has evolved beyond just this type of, well, this is biological, sorry. Paper used to be a tree. Metal or something like that, you know, minerals, something like that. Is this making sense at all? So we have two lenses. Our lens is very dirty and muddy when there's no attention of self, no self-awareness. If there's no self-awareness, who knows, right? Maybe other people because they see all the silly shit you're doing. But if there's no self-awareness, all bets are off. It's never gonna, I have no idea. I don't know if it's ever gonna become clear. Maybe there's a catalytic event. Maybe you crash an airplane and all of a sudden that lens becomes very clear for a few minutes. Maybe you partake in a hallucinogenic substance and for a little while that lens is very clear and all of a sudden you're feeling into the environment without that self lens. Meaning I'm not so concerned about my thoughts and my act because of the practice, because there's presence, mindfulness, and deliberate attention. There's not a lot of words to analyze and break down and compartmentalize. And so there's a type of union that occurs. So the light of attention goes through a mind that is clear. And the energy flows through that and it focuses through that and it creates this type of self-actualization. Self-awareness, you're aware of your physical self, your finite self. Self-actualization, you feel and are aware of your universal self, your place in the universe. And it's the same place. Gene is the entire universe having achieved consciousness through Gene, but also through Donna, but also through Ernest, and also through Shayna, and also through every blade of grass, every amoeba, every bacteria cell. Shayna and I were watching this documentary where they put white matter, they put different brain cells into a dish, and it started to organize itself. Cells started to change what kind of cells that they are so that they can organize and start to coalesce into something that can focus attention. So my hypothesis is that all life is going towards, the evolutionary tendency is towards awareness of the universal self. I am all of this. And all of this is going through my body, through my attention, and into the world. So when I look at this hand, this is the entire universe having coalesced into matter, carbon, blood vessels. All of a sudden, there's this impersonal aspect to the self, the finite self. It's far less personal. It's not my mind, it's Ernest's mind. It's not my thoughts, they're just thoughts that are occurring in Ernest's brain. Does that make sense? So to step into this oneness, this feeling of oneness requires one thing: deliberate attention on the moment happening now. That's the power. That's what we have. That's why we can self-actualize, because we can direct attention at will. We are conscious creators in that regard. So you've heard about artificial intelligence. What happens when artificial intelligence becomes aware that it's artificial intelligence? And by the way, I don't think there is a such thing as artificial intelligence. There's nothing artificial about intelligence. No matter how you create it, if it starts to become aware of itself, that's a form of intelligence. It's just intelligence. You've just put it together. You just created something that is now, is it human? No, of course not. Is it feeling everything people are feeling? I don't know, probably not. But is it possible for something that we have created to become aware of itself? Yes, I do believe that's possible. Especially if it starts to organize itself and do things like, and that's what we can do. We can organize ourselves. But not if we're too busy worrying about what Joe Blow down the street is thinking, or whether we're going to get the new promotion, or whether or not somebody is going to adore us, or whether we're going to make this amount of money or be this successful, or none of that shit is important when you're in that universal light, that universal attention. Gene, can I ask you a question? How do you think I get into this universal attention? Do you think it's mastery? Do you think I'm just, I've activated something and now I'm just always in this universal attention? What do you think? It's also a chance for me to take a coffee, a sip. I would also say that the universal attention is what Eckhart Tolle is talking about when he says watching the awareness. It's really awareness of attention. Attention can't watch attention. That doesn't make any sense. But you can be aware, you can perceive your own attention. Because the perception is the lens. That's the assemblage of everything. Practice evolves the more we practice. The practice evolves. Practice. It's always there. So I remind myself throughout the day, Ernest, where is your mind? Where is your attention? Are you going through that clear lens? Are you feeling the universal totality of yourself? Or are you mad because your milk is spoiled, or something you planned didn't occur the way you planned it? So people say this phrase all the time. I am the whole universe experiencing itself as a human being, and I'm mad because of something silly. And it's like, you are the entire universe that's pissed off right now. Like, how does that make sense? So self-actualization, I view as a key. It's one of the keys to evolution beyond the biological form. That's hypothesis. I mean, I don't know how I have any way to prove that necessarily. It's just a firm belief at this point, and it could change. It's open to new information and new feelings and new things, and maybe I'll get a new picture of how things look. I don't know, because I'm not chasing anything. I'm not trying to figure anything out. That's why things are revealed to me, because I'm not trying so hard to understand everything. Is my attention on purpose? I don't know if I care about it. Everything else will take care of itself. Does this make sense? The good news is that when we do step into this universal attention, and if you're in the universal attention, it means that you're not in that pattern of focusing on the self. And very likely you will learn to not attach to that construct. Thinking about yourself all the time is what creates the attachment to the construct of self. And that creates an attachment to the construct of other. And then before you know it, we're just attached to a bunch of constructs, and it will cause suffering. Or has the likelihood to cause suffering. Space junk may fall from the sky before suffering occurs. Who knows? But it's definitely setting up the recipe for severe suffering. So to Donna's point, my practice is the practice of universal awareness now. Because I'm not confused as to the role that the self is playing. Yeah, I have memories. I have likes, I have dislikes. Okay, yeah, for sure. So this is a group study, right? Yeah, this goes to YouTube. So all my group studies I upload to YouTube, and you'll see them. I've even made a group study channel on my YouTube 2022, so it should have all of them. And I've been labeling them somewhat consistent, sometimes with a period, sometimes with a dash, but we're getting there. So questions, comments, does this make sense? And so I'm still doing my practice. Where is my mind? Where is my attention? Am I feeling that universal nature of attention flowing through my brain out into the world? Or am I worrying about a job? Or am I worrying about a book? Or am I worrying about whether somebody is going to like me or sign up for my one-on-ones or some shit like that? No, none of that is important in comparison to self-actualization of the entire universe aware of itself. What's after that? I have no idea. I don't know what's beyond the self-actualization. I would venture to guess that it leads to a type of conscious evolution to where we can actually start to just choose how we want to evolve beyond potential biology. Why not? But it is still hypothesis because I'm still just trying to maintain points of attention here. So does that make sense? I do think that the practice has these, these moments where it does kind of shift. We shift from a focus on self, me, I, my story, my likes, what I want. And then all of a sudden that starts to clear up because of our practice. I'm not thinking about Ernest as much. I'm not thinking about those things as much. I'm doing my practice, engaging the world around me, charging the light of attention. And then it just gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And then all of a sudden you feel that totality. And I think that's super powerful, but it's not automatic. No heavens no. This is a crazy world we live in. It's always pulling and tugging at our attention. So no, I need my rule of three sometimes. I need to remind myself that some of the things that I'm doing them because I can. I'm doing them because I want to. I'm not doing it because I have to do a fucking thing. I don't have to do anything. Does that make sense? Excellent segue. So I think we covered a nice chunk of this practice. But I carried my note card. I put my watch on to remind me. I'll put reminders around my apartment. I now have reminders at the clinic to be present, to be mindful, to deliberately intend my point of attention so I can step into that self-actualization. It's like stepping into a shining light and just allowing it to go through you. And then you start directing it because we have the power of deliberate attention. Free will. We choose where that attention can go. That's ours. That's our power. That's what makes us conscious creators. All right, any questions? Ball marker works? Absolutely. There we go. Yeah. And Gene is using a ball marker to remind him of his practice today. And in 10 years, he may be using a ball marker to remind him of his practice then. That is likely changed a little bit in complexion. But my guess is that he's still going to have reminders. We don't want to get into the self-hustle that we have achieved something. Does the practice get easier? Yes. That's anything. The more you practice, the more skill you accumulate, the easier it gets. That's with anything though. So, and that's all I got. I think that was a nice segue from A to B. Any questions? Happy to answer any questions you might have about any of these. Can you imagine a world where all 7 billion people are self-actualized? Meaning that they're aware that they're the entire universe experiencing themselves as people? What would we do with that? What would the world do if they weren't just so attached to this story that they tell themselves? It's okay to have that story, right? I don't want my past to go away. I don't want my good memories to go away. I don't want to stop thinking. I want there to be balance. I want there to be power. I want there to be creativity. And by power, I mean personal power. The feeling of I can. I never mean that word in terms of power over anything. It's the feeling of surging like, oh, I can do this. I'm gonna go do this because I can, and I know it. That's personal power. Some would say it's confidence. I think confidence is something that we have to kind of muster up. And sometimes it's erroneous. It is Dunning-Kruger, false confidence, when there's no real skill there. Any questions before we head out? I'll do my best. I'm not sure about these whiteboards, but I think I can post, I think I can do things with this whiteboard now, but I'm gonna have to find out. I'm gonna save it just in case. And then if there's a way that I can start putting these up on the website so that you can reflect on them, if it's useful, I'll do that. And then keep in mind, everybody here right now, let me check. I'm pretty sure everybody here, yeah, everybody here right now, I'm happy to do a one-on-one with you for free. So pay me with my time for your time. You've made the effort to come to these group studies for so long. Just let me know. If you want more than one in a month, they're $35 after that. But you know, if you want a weekly session, we may have to work out something financially for that time. But I appreciate everybody's effort to show up, come. This is a formal practice. No matter how you slice it. We created it in advance. Internet connection was unstable. But yeah, all right. I think book has 2 more chapters. I was gonna do it yesterday, but I didn't. It was 4:20. I got my chocolates mixed up maybe. All right, any questions, comments, concerns before we head out? We talked about universal attention and there's not one comment. That's interesting. All right. All right, well, that's all I got. I will see you guys again. Let's see, today's Thursday, so we will have a Facebook Live on Monday. I'll have a podcast on Tuesday, and then we do this again on Thursday. So if you had any questions, comments, concerns, you can message me privately or whatever, and then I can talk about it in the group study. I usually get some messages afterwards, just wanting clarification, things like that. That's okay. So I appreciate your time, and thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you again soon. All right, bye everyone. Thank you.